Okay, so the accounts receivable and cash section of the chapter, not too bad. Notes receivable, a bit more challenging. This part, it just gets confusing because there's so many different ways notes can be structured, and you have to figure out how to set them up properly. Okay, so notes receivable, unconditional promises to pay a certain amount of money at a certain time. Okay, they have the terminology, they are signed by the maker, who is the borrower. They are payable to the lender, who is the payee. Yeah, okay, then they can be classified as trade or non-trade. We talked about that a little bit at the beginning. The basic types of notes receivable, you've got your interest-bearing notes, and these have a stated interest rate. You're going to pay 8%, you're going to pay 6%. It's stated on the note itself. And then you have non-interest-bearing notes. Non-interest-bearing notes are zero interest-bearing notes. The interest is implicit in the terms of the note. So you're going to lend out $8,000, you're going to get back $10,000. The interest is the difference between those two amounts. And then we'll have notes exchanged for property, goods, or services that we'll have to account for. The other complication is you can have interest-bearing notes with an unreasonably low interest rate, and that we also have to account for. So we'll see how all of that works. Okay, so now, review of the terms. I've got a whole page here of a bunch of terms that you need to take the time to understand, because it'll make your life a lot easier going through this chapter. Because the book is very dense in terms of terminology anyway. They're going to throw around a lot of these terms. You got to know how they work. So face amount, the amount on the note. The stated interest rate, that would be obviously the interest rate stated on the note. The effective interest rate is the market rate for similar notes for companies of similar risk, and that is going to be the basis of how we account for the notes. If the stated interest rate is equal to the effective interest rate, to the market rate, then there's no problem. The accounting for that is fairly simple. But when there is a discrepancy between the two, say you've got a note out for the effective interest rate for similar loans would be 8%, and you've loaned money to someone at 3%, we have to account for that. Okay, so the present value of the note, this goes back to our tables. It's going to be the present value of the future, the principal and the interest cash flows. And your discount on notes receivable, or premium on notes receivable. And this is similar to bonds. Think of bonds that were issued at a premium or a discount. This is when the stated rate is different from the market rate. The notes will be issued at a premium or a discount. Yeah, this just gets worse and worse. Okay, so the net carrying amount of the note will be similar to what we did with bonds. It'll be the face value plus premium, or face value less discount. We amortize the premium or discount over the notes, just like we did over bonds. Okay, and then the implicit interest rate and imputing the interest rate, you just have to figure that all out. Okay, it's implied in the terms of the note, and then if you're imputing it, you're trying to figure out what it is. Okay, all right, so that's a lot of the terms on notes receivable. The next thing we get to is, yes, some of them will be short-term, and some will be long-term. The short-term ones are really treated more as accounts receivable. The interest is generally not that material, so they have a valuation, notes receivable, less allowance of doubtful accounts. They're reported at their net realizable value, and they're basically carried at their face value. Of course, those aren't the ones we're going to work with in the chapter, the easy ones. We're going to do the long-term ones that we have to do all the fancy accounting for. So the long-term, they're recognized at the present value of their future cash flows less the allowance for doubtful accounts. And so we will see how all this works. I'll do a few examples of each type of note, and then in the homework you'll sort of see all the complexities that arise.